Gvoran Harda. Back to the English. That's all in Origin I really know. Know a little bit. But this is part 2. Third wave, second-rate Norwegian black metal bands. If you don't know what this is, or if you missed part 1, link in the description. Inform yourself. But this is basically Norwegian black metal bands that are lesser known, but also of the high-quality ilk. They're just not your Burzums and your Satyricons and Mayhems and Immortals and all that kind of stuff that you hear about all the time. I want to talk about my fandom for Norwegian metal, mostly black metal, and foregoing all the stuff that you already know about. So, with that in mind, I've chosen to play Manes Under ein Blodred Mana, which translates to Under One Blood Red Moon. This is some nasty stuff. Came out on Hammerheart Records, I don't know, 96, something like that. Great stuff. Their demos are fucking killer. So, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bands to talk about. Several releases by each band, but I am kind of basically discussing the discographies of said bands and not particularly talking about exact albums. Actually, I forgot. I've got one down here, 6. So, let's get started. This is Thimble from Norway. And these guys, well, this guy released 2 demos in the year 1995. And that was all he ever did again. They were very obscure, very limited, probably 100 copies each or so. So luckily in 2007, this label, Kandarian Demon Productions, reissued both of the demos on CD for you to pick up. And I recommend doing it. It's really good stuff. It's very, very nasty and evil sounding, like Strid, Iltjarn, Swordfaktor, that kind of stuff. It's very, very raw and nasty, but it has very nice use. I guess the second demo on here has a very nice use of keyboards, like you would expect from a good Norwegian black metal band. But yeah, it's really nice, primitive, raw as all fuck. Got a little bit of sort of that hypnotic sort of atmosphere to it as well. So 2 demos were called Vinterland and Det Slaget. So yeah, Thimble, Fimbul. Of course, with everything, as best I can, links down below for your perusal. Next, we're going to talk about one of the big names in this pile. Hopefully, you've already heard of or are aware of Hades. This is their debut full-length, Again Shall Be. And this one is great. A lot of people go between saying that this is their best record. A lot of people say that Dawn of the Dying Sun is their best record. Apples, oranges, doesn't matter. These are great, great full lengths. I think it's always kind of nice when a band that you like has 2 or maybe 3 albums in their discography that you can't decide are the best ones. What does it fucking matter? You've got 3 great albums. Even beyond that, Alone Walking, the EP, is also really great. It's just that some of the songs, 3 of the songs on that are also on the debut Again Shall Be. But if you don't know, Hades, they're kind of a different ilk for Norwegian black metal. They're really slow and brooding and really mighty sounding, and they've got a lot of triumphant sort of build up to choruses and stuff like that. There's just really well produced stuff by Pitten, of course, and just some of the most haunting atmospheres. Just the stuff is just super, super great. And then they, a couple years later, released this Millennium Nocturne album under the name Hades Almighty. Now, they kind of get a lot of flack, I think, for this record for kind of being, I don't know, a little more modern sounding and breaking away from their style. But I honestly kind of like this album. It's really no Dawn of the Dying Sun, of course, or Again Shall Be for that matter, but it's really good. If you're a Hades fan and you've always looked over this one, give it a shot. It's definitely worth revisiting if it's something that you've just kind of shit on without giving a chance. After this one, I think they actually recently reformed and started doing more stuff back under the name Hades, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't really listened to it. They may have even done another one after this. I'm really not too certain. But yeah, Hades is great. Dawn of the Dying Sun is something that I listen to pretty often. Even got it on LP. I've got the Full Moon Productions versions of the LP, and I don't recommend buying that one. I'm not sure if there has been a reissue. But there's lots and lots of sound problems with that LP issue. I think one of the songs on the second side actually starts off with like 45 seconds of static or something even. It's just god-awful and wretched. But also they've got Lamented Souls, not a black metal band per se, but these musicians in Lamented Souls are in black metal bands. We've got OJ Mo or Apollyon, whatever you want to call him, from Aura Noir, Dordheimsgard, Immortal, all that kind of stuff on bass. We've got ICS Vortex or Simon Hesnays from Borknagar, Dimmy Borger on vocals, and that guy's vocals are phenomenal in all of his bands. But I really like the application of his vocals to this style of music, and it's very different from these guys' other bands. It's very, very melodic doom. Definitely not the ilk of doom where it's like sludgy or stonery. It's very musical. I guess you could kind of say it sounds a little bit more like Candlemass or Pentagram, I guess, in some ways. It's got a really unique sound of its own. This is called The Origins of Misery, and this is a full-length album with a couple of demos tacked on to the end. Duplicate Records put this out probably going on 15 years ago or so now. The drummer in this band is Einar Schierso, who also played in Beyond Dawn. This is on LP. It's not a very cheap LP to pick up, but it's a very great album. And I think that they are working on another album, but I don't know. I'm not going to hold my breath, but definitely check this out if that sounds interesting to you. They're a highly unique band, Lamented Souls. Next, speaking of unique, these guys are some of the weirdest there are. Talking about Fluidity with Min Tid Skal Komma, or My Time Shall Come. So this is a shitty reissue by Candlelight. This originally came out on Misanthropy Records in 94, 95, 93 actually. So this again is a full length with two demos, actually a compilation track and a demo tacked on the end. Really, really, really bizarre stuff. You know, they get lumped in with Vedboy and Zenda and kind of like Arcturus maybe a little bit. What's that other group? I'm not even going to be able to think of it. But these guys are a bizarre beast all their own. I'm a little annoyed by the drums on the full length, but there's very much more to make up for that in the weird guitars and vocals department. When you think about how young these guys must have been, probably 17, 18, 19 or so when this stuff was recorded, they were really, really thinking outside of the necro box, if you want to call it that. But yeah, this stuff is just, I don't know, it's a really beast of its own, and I think it will go down as being more and more revered as people realize how bizarre and odd this particular release was. A couple years later, they came back and did this EP called Last Minute Lies, and this came out on Supernal Music. I would say this is probably 98, 99 or so. And so for its time, around that time, this isn't quite as weird as all the other stuff that was coming out at that time. There was a lot of that sort of turn of the century, apocalyptic sort of techno fear kind of stuff going on. And that parlayed into a lot of metal for a various amount of reasons. So this isn't bad by any means. It's actually kind of got its charm to it. But it's just definitely not as weird as this debut was back in 93. when his country mates were doing stuff like Bergtod and yeah. And then they did this other full-length Department of Apocalyptic Affairs maybe a year or two later, also on Supernal Music. And this is also pretty bizarre, a lot more technicality, kind of maybe electronic sort of stuff going on here and there. Carl Michael Ide plays drums on one track. This has got kind of a lot of buddies playing on different tracks. I haven't opened this up in a really long time. It's got a weird package to it. It's got like this manila file folder, and then each song has these weird tracks. I forgot about this. I haven't seen this in so many years. I don't listen to this very often, obviously, but what an interesting kind of thing. So it's like a manila folder, Department of Apocalyptic Affairs. Next we have a band who released only one album, and I actually prefer it that way. I love that a band sometimes has one release, it's goddamn perfect, and they never tried to better that album. I absolutely respect the hell out of bands who can let their discography be and not come back and try and reinvent the wheel and can move on beyond their past. So what I'm talking about is Kvist with For Kunsten må vi evig vika. For the art may last eternally, I think is what that translates to. Anyways, I do feel like this is a pretty well-known album, but just being that it lumps in so well with this video, I couldn't pass on a chance to talk about it. This is a Peaceville reissue of the album that originally came out on, I think it was Avant Garde, if I'm not mistaken. Just black vinyl. But they did a nice job. I love that Peaceville is doing a lot of this reissuing albums that deserve it from back in the day. Anyways, stylistically, this is every bit as much of a black metal or Norwegian black metal album as their country mates like Emperor and Immortal and stuff like that. Great stuff. I always kind of think of these guys as maybe a little bit more melodic and keyboard-driven version of Immortal. If you take kind of the frosty production of Battles in the North, and you kind of turn down a little bit of the aggression and turned up a little bit more of the atmosphere and melodicism driven with the keyboards, I think you'd have something pretty close to Kvist. Just a standalone classic on its own. This guy and several other guys, I think, went on to do Urgahall, which I'm not so hot on, but I really respect how he was able to just shut the door on this project and move on. Who knows what could have happened if this would have been, the project that he stuck with, but it probably wouldn't have been as good as this album, so I really appreciate that about it. So Kvist, check that out if you haven't heard it. It's fucking absolutely great. And last but not least, I talked about these guys for a second in my last video because I played Return to the Isle of Man in the background. But this is In the Woods. And so, yeah, that was a compilation of their demos with a track or two thrown on. That was pretty great. But this is their debut full-length, Heart of the Ages. Misanthropy Records released this back in 95. And, a lot of people probably do know this band, but I definitely want to take a chance to highlight them. They're really one of my favorites when it comes to this kind of second-rate Norwegian bands. They are one of the originators, in my opinion, of atmospheric metal. It's not necessarily in the same way that you would expect, but I think they kind of took upon some of the influences that Burzum was probably working with, how they may have even heard a little bit of what Burzum was doing at the time and ran with it. I wouldn't be surprised if that could be said. But this is a fantastic debut full-length. This is probably my favorite one from them, but the follow-up they did, Omnio, is definitely amazing as well. But they started working at, this is 97. The breadth of their songs just got so much huger and maybe a little bit more kind of Pink Floydian, if you will. And I really like what they did, but it just kind of sounds a little bit less down to earth than their debut does. This also was out on Misanthropy Records. Also had this on LP. It's a 3-sided etched kind of thingy. They continue to get weirder and weirder and weirder with Strange in Stereo, which I also have here. I don't really listen to this one that much, so I'd be remiss to try and explain that one. It's been a long time. There was another album they did after this one that got even more weird. I'm not sure if that's really even up my alley, but they reformed a couple of years ago, and they did this full-length album, Pure, and it's really, really good. It's again, I kind of have a lot of mixed feelings about bands who come back together again and try and recreate some of the old magic that was there. I believe one of the members passed away also before this was recorded, so I know there's a lot to say and discuss about bands reforming with and without members who were there originally, or what have you, and it's not really my place to say what a band can or can't do, but I just can say that sometimes I don't like it. So In the Woods, Pure, the comeback album, was pretty good. Better than I expected, honestly, but definitely not as good as any of their first ones. But that's it for today. A couple of Norwegian bands for you to check out. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining me.